My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk. And before we dive into the show, I just want to remind everyone of a couple of things. Don't forget that if you want to continue this conversation, come join our Facebook group. You can join that by going to Facebook and just looking for 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk, the community. And I also want you to not forget that once a month we do a 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk chat. Those happen on the third Monday of the month most of the time. Sometimes we switch it up. But if you'd like to sign up and be notified when we're doing those chats, you can go to gaymengaytalk.com or you can go to gaymens, MENS, chats.com, and you'll see the schedule. We're starting to put the New Year schedule together. I know that new things are coming along the way. We're going to be talking about some eroticism sort of stuff and, confidence. And we always have great conversations, but just wanted to throw those out. But let's get to what we're here for today. What I know is most people 40 plus that are gay men in their gay lives, there's a whole lot of stuff that can happen. Everything from, oh my gosh, how do I date to maybe I'm on the verge of sex and porn addiction. Well, we're going to go cover all of that today. Joining me today is a therapist based in the LA area. His name is Brandon Simpson, and he has really made it his role in his work to create safe spaces for LGBTQ people to really talk about the stuff that's important. And he is trained in trauma and addiction, especially in the areas of sex and porn addiction, but he is also an LMFT, and he can help you pretty much with everything. I don't know, he can cook you dinner, but he might if you're really cute. I think he might help you out there. But Brandon, welcome to the podcast. So glad that you're here with me today.
Thank you for having me. This is an exciting topic, and I think it's a topic that doesn't get a lot of bandwidth in podcasts and stuff. So I'm excited.
Yeah, so we're going to start with let's just the commonality of what can happen for many men. The common thing of, oh my gosh, dating really sucks and I'm having a hard time. And then it can actually lead to some of these addiction things that we wanted to talk about. So let's compare notes, coach to therapist, what's happening in your world when it comes to gay men or gay and bisexual men when it comes to dating? What are some of the big hot buttons for you?
Yeah, a really big hot topic that me and a lot of my patients talk about is the dating culture just in general has shifted. They are used to, a lot of my patients, they're used to going out to the bars and, striking up a conversation with someone, using a lot of those interpersonal skills that they have gained throughout their life. Whereas a lot of younger men these days, I say we, but I'm 30 something. So close.
You're a baby. You're a baby. I'm just going to say.
A lot of the interpersonal skills aren't there. They are, a lot of these kids who are 21 through 25, 26, they grew up using cell phones. They grew up in a technological era, and it really inhibits a lot of the social connections. And so dating is shifted, and it's trying to navigate that field.
I love this because I hear that a lot. Okay. But then it's always so funny to me. I'll be talking to a guy that's in his 40s or 50s or something. They're like, yeah, we're talking about this, especially if I'm in person. If I'm on, if I'm on a Zoom call with one of my clients, it's a little bit different. But if I'm in person with somebody and they're talking about this and they've got their phone out and they're talking to me I'm like, you're complaining about something you're doing too, man. So come on. Give me a little bit of a break. But it is a different world. I mean, it literally is. Now, my husband and I actually met online. So this was back in the day. This is in the late 90s, right around 2001. Well, we met the week of 9/11. And it was a site. Some of the guys may remember this, Planet Out. It was very much snail mail, sort of you see a profile, you send a message, then it goes to their email, then they got to get the email, then they reply back. Then it comes back into the system oh, you got it. It's kind of like you got mail sort of thing. Yeah. That was probably the precursor to so much of this. And now we are literally okay, where do we go meet? How do we have those interactions? And yes, that touch point of being able to like really be with somebody and go, how do we communicate? It's a whole new challenge. And so many guys
Yeah.
are struggling with this. And
Yeah.
it takes that personal touch away in so many ways.
Yeah. And I think it does take, you know, the effort isn't there anymore, because I think
Mm-hmm.
that was, you know, before, you know, the Tinders, the Grinders, the Hinges, you know, you had to actually make an effort.
Right.
You know, you didn't, even if you did meet someone, it was random at a bar, you thought he was cute and you wanted to get to know him a little bit more, you'd have to get his phone number. You'd have to physically call him to be
Yes.
able to set up that time, to be able to be very mindful with where you guys are going and everything. And now it's a quick text message or it's a quick DM,
Mm-hmm.
which my phone, I'm usually very notorious that someone will text me, I'll read it and forget to reply. And then, and my patients are like, but he hasn't replied. I was like, did you try it again?
Right.
And so it's this like,
Well, it's
how do
all
you,
instant gratification,
yep,
a
yeah,
lot of it, you know,
but
and that makes it really challenging. And it is interesting to see what I'm going to consider the, you know, older generation. So the boomers and definitely the Gen Xers are like,
mm-hmm,
okay, what's going on here? Right.
mm-hmm,
But yet, when I talk to younger people, they're kind of complaining about the same thing. It's like,
yeah,
okay, we're connecting through like what's in the palm of our hands. No pun intended there, guys, but what's in the
mm-hmm,
palm of our hands. And then there's this like, ooh, but they didn't reply. They didn't say something, or you didn't get that
mm-hmm,
immediate reaction. I find that for most of the guys that I work with, it's like, okay, well, reevaluate your expectations. And secondly, set up the rules of play or the boundaries that, like,
yeah,
hey, if we're going to communicate, this is what I like. So I was coaching somebody the other day, and he's like, well, that seems, to your point, he goes, that seems like a lot of work. And it was all I could do to bite my tongue and not laugh. Like, okay, but relationships are
mm-hmm,
work. I mean,
yeah.
that's part of this. So, what are some of the things you're helping your clients with when you get into that space where they're like, oh, this is too much work, or, you know, everybody just wants this? What are some of the things you're challenging them? Because I know as a therapist, you're like a coach. It's like, I'm not going to solve the problem for you per se.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to challenge you to really like find your own answers. So, what are some of the things you're helping them do?
Yeah. So I do a lot of boundary and expectation work too, because I think it is
Mm-hmm.
that moment that they expect something very specific, or they are easy to kind of dump or throw away the interaction if it doesn't meet up those expectations. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really working with a lot of my patients to be like, hey, like where is this? Let's figure out, is it too sensitive? Is it not sensitive enough? Where can we meet kind of in the middle? And I think it is, because, and to your point, it's interesting because a lot of my patients, when I say, well, tell this date, your expectations, they're like, but it's only the first date. That's too pushy. I was like, and I usually have to remind them, well, then is it someone you want to be with then? If you feel
Right.
like if they're going to run away, I'm like, can you theoretically say that like you kind of dodged a bullet there?
Mm-hmm. It's
Um,
interesting to hear those sort of things come up because it's like, okay, so there's this other desire expectation. I think that's the best way to put it. I just want to be in a relationship. I want a guy.
mhm,
Okay. But do you want to be with someone who you can't have some boundaries with, that you can't
yeah,
bring these sort of things up? Because then what does that say about the way both of you do
connect to each other.
relationships?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Exactly. And it makes it really difficult. So when somebody is like, oh, I don't know, I can do that. What is a way that you challenge them? Because I have my
I
ideas.
I usually have them listed out. I'm a really big person. It's actually very interesting because any of my patients that come to me about relationship issues or issues connecting with others, I usually give them this task where I want you to list out all of your expectations, the
Mm-hmm.
do's and don'ts of being in a relationship with you. You know,
Mm-hmm.
what are you willing to accept into that relationship? What are you not willing to accept?
Yep.
And then what I do is I help them negotiate those boundaries, because our boundaries are not they're not hard and fast. They don't just stay there. They move. They're tangible. They get pores even. So I usually help a lot of my patients navigate that, so
Right.
that when they go into an interaction and they go into a date, I usually call it pool rules
Mm.
of engaging with you.
Yep.
And so I usually have them, and after a date, I'm usually like, okay, well, what pool rules were broken? And then we
Mm.
usually go through them, and usually I tell them to give themselves and the other person some slack, because I'm like,
Yep.
it's your first date. Everyone is nervous. No one is going to perform at 100% the first time.
Right.
So, and then I tell them, are those pool rules that are broken, are they big rules?
Mm-hmm.
Or are they, you know what, they would be nice if they were there?
Right. Right.
And then I
We
usually tell
put
them,
so
give
much
them until the third date.
emphasis. Yeah, we put so much emphasis on this has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And after being in my relationship for 23 years, the engagement and the rules and how yes, there's a solid core that's like,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, but there's other pieces that it's fluid, it's always changing. Your
Mm-hmm.
perspectives, your desires, what you expect, all these different things are constantly. And I guess if I could share, I wanted to say teach, but if I could just share with like younger generations, like just realize your relationship is going to be fluid. It is
Mm-hmm.
never going to be 100% what you
Yep.
believe in the magical, you know, boy meets, boy wonder, whatever world.
Yeah, yeah.
It's always going to change. And that's actually, in my perspective, very healthy. The
Mm-hmm.
more that you can manage change in your relationship, the more willing you probably are to be in it. Now, obviously, if certain things shift, like suddenly you're not, enjoying sex with each other, or you're
Mm-hmm.
suddenly like, my partner spends more time watching porn or something like that than actually wanting to be with me, then there's some new rules of engagement that need to
Yeah.
be discussed. And I would highly recommend working with, you know, I do that kind of work. I don't mind doing that kind of work, but there's certain techniques that I feel like a marriage and family therapist can really dig into. Now, I've done some couples work. Mine is always a more about, okay, let's identify the problem and let's start moving towards how do you want to rectify it, which is similar to you.
Yeah,
However,
yeah.
I feel like the area where LMFT people really can do this in a much better way is oftentimes there's something built in to
Mm-hmm.
how each person got socialized,
Yep.
some belief of the family systems that embedded really super deep. I'm
Yeah.
not going to go dig in the deep. I mean, I can like catapult forward. I can go, oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
How can
yeah.
we catapult beyond that? Because I never want to get in that space where if I feel like that's a little bit deeper,
Mm-hmm.
psychological, let's unpack that sort of work. I definitely like hand that over to somebody else because I feel like you all are much better trained in that space. But people are petrified to do that stuff.
Yeah, doing that work is, you have to look underneath the rocks. You have
Mm-hmm.
to it is that work is, you're getting down and dirty. You
Mm-hmm.
have to switch a lot of perceptions you have about the world. You have to confront a lot of the pain that you haven't talked about in
Yep.
20, 30, 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking that you had it all nice and packed away,
Yep.
but it's been leaking and it's destroying things around it. Yeah.
It is interesting to see when somebody starts to give themselves permission to go there because
Mm-hmm.
it can be first of all, it can be very freeing. It's going to be, for
Mm-hmm.
most people, it's going to be, ooh, this is uncomfortable. The discomfort is
Yeah.
truly there, right? But it's always magical when you see that moment that the discomfort shifts to freedom. Like,
Yeah.
okay, this is off. I just recently recorded a quick little Instagram video about secrets.
Mm-hmm.
And like, here's 5 secrets gay men should be talking about. And it's been
Mm.
interesting to see the comments because it
Yeah.
wasn't what people were thinking. Like you should free the secret of stuff you're really proud of. You don't want to
Yeah.
be, you don't want to share that because you don't want to be taken as egocentric. You should free the secret of your regrets. You should
Mm-hmm.
free the secret of what you really desire. And some of the comments have been so far really interesting. Like, I didn't really realize that. One guy gave me a whole dissertation, and I love that he did because
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was a really beautiful way of him saying, here's the one thing I'm feeling most secretive about, which was, I'm not going to go into it here on the air, but something pretty deep. And I,
Yeah.
gave him
Yeah.
a little bit of advice back and forth and said, I would really suggest you work with a therapist on this because this is deeper. There's a piece of shame that your
Yeah.
family has set up. And he went into some depth about, family systems. And I'm like, I would encourage you to go work through that because it is scary but it's not impossible, and it's actually quite freeing when we give ourselves permission to do that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about one of the secrets that most people are like, oh, I don't think I have a problem with this.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's one. Well, it's actually two, but they kind of go hand in hand a little bit. So here we are in this lovely dating world. We're trying to get
Yeah.
out there and all this sort of stuff. We get frustrated, and then we're beings. We're sexual beings. I believe
Yeah.
that we are sexual beings as we are human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And so then suddenly, where do we start to turn? Maybe random sex, maybe a lot of porn.
Yeah.
And then suddenly we isolate. There's been so much isolation, Brandon. I know you know this, during and post pandemic.
Yep.
That, okay, if this dating thing isn't working after a couple of tries, then I'm just going to pleasure myself and watch porn.
Yeah.
And then suddenly people can dip into that. So what is a sign that you have seen that really showcases somebody is starting to step into the either sex or, I'm going to say, sex and porn addiction? Like, what's something somebody can see?
Yeah. So what I'm seeing with a lot of my patients, it is that social isolation. You're prioritizing the pornography or the random hookups over more healthier social interactions. Your friends, your family, you're starting to really cut away from them. There's also a kind of like an exacerbation effect. So, what used to be able to be pleasurable and used to find erotic doesn't work anymore. So now you have to start going to more and more extremes of categories of pornography, of types of porn you watch, where you watch it. Even for random hookups, it's where are you having the sex? Who are you having sex with? It starts getting more and more quote unquote dangerous, because it is that adrenaline rush that people are looking for, that serotonin and that dopamine. And a lot of times it's impacting their relationships. We don't, humans in general, we don't see there's a problem until the problem is there.
Exactly.
And usually for most of my patients, it's their partners have found their search history. They realize they're watching it a lot more than what they thought it was. It's stuff that they never thought about in their relationship. Or they get caught, it is cheating. They get caught cheating. They see the text messages. They see the money being depleted out of their bank accounts. That's usually when my patients then are like, okay, well, now there's a problem.
Yeah. And it's like any addiction. I mean, I've worked with people through it in different ways. And sometimes it can just be the addiction of isolation. I worked with a few clients that they're just, I'm not a social being. And we really had to work through like, okay, but again, it's post-pandemic. Like, did you get so comfortable being non-social that now you've created a story around this? But when I worked into that space with them, it was always really interesting, Brandon, because I would then go to, well, do you even want to have an interaction with a guy? Do you want to go on a date? Oh, well, I don't know that I could. And a lot of times it's because the comfort of the isolation has now become the protection zone. It's like, as long as I stay here, I don't get hurt. I don't have to deal with rejection. I don't have to deal with, maybe starting to date somebody and then boom, it's gone. And so then it gets fed with whether it's porn or random sex from time to time, or everything else, eating, drinking, whatever it might be. And suddenly the snowball blossoms. But most people are really surprised when you do bring up, so what is it that you're running from and you're running into in your addiction? Yeah.
And a lot of times I help a lot of my patients map out their unbearables. What is so unbearable about your day to day? What is unmanageable for you? What is just so hard to deal with? And then, usually pornography, sex, it could definitely be eating and substances. What is that kind of final moment to push you to interact with those things? And that's how we have to start. We have to start mapping those out, because if you don't get to the root of those unmanageables or those unbearables, and I've seen this a lot with a handful of my patients, is the addiction transcribes itself. So they'll take the porn away. They're like, hey, I haven't watched porn and I haven't masturbated in 3 months, but I've noticed like I've been smoking an excessive amount of weed. So it's like, okay, so we haven't got to the root of the problem yet.
Right.
We took the
Right.
surface away, and now you found a new surface level thing to kind of help you through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But now we have to go a little deeper.
But that's pretty common in the addiction world,
Mm-hmm.
is that we move from one addiction to the next. And it can be something as simple as, you quit using pot, but now I don't know, this is an extreme, but I've seen it. You were using pot, now you're getting lots of tattoos,
Yeah.
or now, you quit overeating, but then you start drinking,
Yeah.
Nicotine addiction. I mean, I'm somebody who was a nicotine addict. And when I finally broke it over, gosh, it's been almost 15 years ago now. I
Okay.
didn't think about it. I don't think about it. It's like, in fact, it's so interesting to go through the phase. Like, okay, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to shame
Yeah.
myself, all this sort of stuff. Got used to it. But then I went through a phase, and still today to a little bit, but I went through a
Mm-hmm.
phase where just the smell of smoke was like, got really bristled. Not like I was craving it. It's like, get that away from me. Just
Yeah.
stay
Yeah.
away from me if you smoke. Now I consider it such an uncommon thing that I see out
Mm-hmm.
there in the world. And I don't know, maybe it's because I live in California and it doesn't seem like as many people smoke here. I don't know. And I
Yeah.
don't want to
Yeah.
make any assumptions because I know it happens. But it is interesting to see how you ascribe to something and you go, okay, but what did I replace it with?
Yeah. Yeah.
Luckily, I replaced mine for the most part with, that's when I started teaching spin class and became a cyclist and all these sort of things.
Okay.
But there are times that I'm going, okay, but did I really get past this 100%?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always try to check in with myself in that space. Like, okay, well,
Okay.
what could be being replaced by it? So far, I'm not setting myself up. So far, I haven't
Mm-hmm.
seen myself on anything else that's like, I would say, oh, that's an addiction. But I think this is part of the piece of the puzzle for our listeners to really think about. First of all, if you have an addiction, get the right support,
Yeah.
and don't shame yourself because of it. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that prevents most people. In fact, that would be a really great thing to talk about, Brandon. Like, what is some of the shame that people feel when they're battling, like, okay, I have this addiction, and then they won't do anything? What are a lot of the shame pieces that show up?
Yeah, and a lot of the shame pieces have to do with their image, like how they feel about themselves. I am unworthy. I am not, I am unworthy of love. I am unworthy of, attention, of positive regard. That's a lot of what I'm seeing. And it even happens to the fact where a lot of the people who come to me and they are addicted to porn, what usually tends to happen is the shame, once they admit there's an issue, there is it's heightened shame. And what they do then tend to happen is it's an anorectic phase, is they
Mm,
completely withdraw from anything sexual. Because they're like, if I touch it, I'm going to go overboard again, kind of mentality. And it is this new stress that tends to come up. And especially since we in the United States, we are in a capitalistic society where we have found out sex sells. You can't go down, I'm in West Hollywood. You can't walk down Santa Monica Boulevard without seeing half naked men in the bars, or you're seeing the promo ads everywhere, and everyone is half naked. Let alone living in Los Angeles, everyone's like,
right.
I have a body for some
Right.
reason, and I'm going to show it off. And it then kind of touches upon that maladaptive wiring of sexuality and sex. And that's usually a lot of also the contingent work, is how do we rewire that so it's
Right.
so it's a little more positive for you, and it's not as detrimental anymore.
I love that you can take that piece and put it together, because I think so much of the shame is, if I can't meet that standard, then I'm no good. So let's just compound the no good by continuing to
Mm-hmm.
do this thing that actually
Mm-hmm.
then makes me feel even less no good.
Yep.
And unfortunately, it's a slippery slope. It's a really
Yeah.
super slippery slope. And again, having worked with some people, had some people in my own world in that space, I found, even as I started to realize, and there was a point in my life where I'm like, I wonder if I'm slipping down this slope into alcoholism and
Mm-hmm.
sex addiction. And when
Yeah.
I stepped away and started to have the real conversations with myself, one of the things I kept coming back to, and I was just beginning to like really be exposed to coaching. So I had a
Mm-hmm.
coach at the time. But I remember my coach at the time, and this had nothing to do with my addictions. It was like, career moves and everything.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember the first time she asked me the question, what is it you really desire, and who would you be if you could make that desire happen?
Okay.
And I remember when I started having those thoughts around, am I drinking too much and am I having too much random sex? I really used that question to help wake me up. Like, what is it I
Okay.
really desired? What I really
Yeah.
desired was a rich relationship that made me feel, I'm never going to use the word whole because I don't think a relationship is part of the equation to making you feel
Mm-hmm.
whole. Only you can make yourself feel whole. But that having a relationship who gave me that companionship, that person that I could lean into and trust and come home to. And, I came out of a marriage to a woman and I was used to that.
Yeah.
And when I started grounding back into that and going, okay, this makes sense, and going, this is what I really want. And I will be different because then I will be happier. I will feel more alive. I will feel
Mm-hmm.
more confident in who I am. It was really interesting. The drinking's similar, except again, I wasn't to the point where it was like, oh my gosh. I mean, I'd go on some bingers, which everybody does, like, okay, it's a party weekend, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then after I had an experience where I'm pretty sure I was slipped something into a drink.
Mm.
And I'm like waking up in this bed with this guy and going, I have no idea who you are. I don't know how I got here. That was the time I said, okay, is this what you really want? What is it you to desire? And who will you be
Yeah.
if you can get what you? And it was a really big wake up moment for me, Brandon, because I let myself go deep into that space. So if somebody's really struggling, what is, and well, let me rephrase that question. How does somebody really even know they're struggling? And I know that's a loaded question, but like, so what are some of the things you help people really understand? Like, maybe there
That is
is this thing.
that is a loaded question, but I do think, you even mentioned it, having that, you know, I think a really telltale sign is, trying to really get that wholesome and appropriate support.
Hmm.
Because I think, especially as I help a lot of my patients with sex and porn addiction, especially gay men who are experiencing those things, it's I have to really help them rewire that, that's not what it means to be gay. A lot
Mhm.
of them have this notion that they're like, no, I'm a gay man. I'm supposed to be horny all the time. I'm supposed to want to have sex with random people. I'm supposed to be, going out to bars and going to the cruising spots and hooking up with whoever I want. That's what it means to be in the community. And it's further reinforced by their support group.
Mhm.
I had a patient who sat on my couch and he was like, yeah, but all my friends say nothing's wrong with me. And so I had to
Mhm.
stop him. I was like, but do you feel like there's an issue? And he's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I do. Because he's like, I just don't want to do it anymore. He's like, yeah, they're telling me like this is what it means, quote unquote, but like it just doesn't sit right with who I am. And I was like,
Mhm.
that's what we have to figure out. Like we have to get that internal alignment, right, so that you can walk through your world authentically.
That internal alignment is huge. I do a
Yeah.
lot of work around values. In fact, I had a conversation just recently with a client and said, what is the core value that is not aligned with that you hold to be true for you?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a similar conversation around the hooking up and everything. And he actually said, one of my core values is authenticity and integrity. And so then I explored with him, like, well, how
Mm-hmm.
are you not being authentic if you're hooking up all the time? How are you not being in integrity? And he got really quiet. And he goes, it's probably more the integrity that hits
Mm-hmm.
first. And then it's followed by the authenticity. He goes,
Yeah.
I don't really enjoy the casual hookup, but I do
Mm-hmm.
it because this is my only way I'm getting, quote, a release that's at least enjoyable rather than, masturbation and pleasuring myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I said, so who are you out of integrity with?
Mm-hmm.
And he got super quiet. And he goes, I think myself.
Yeah.
And it was a really interesting conversation to continue because we really did dig into, he felt like he wasn't being integrity with himself, and then he wasn't really being authentic with himself. And then he said it snowballed. I'm not really being integrity with these guys that I'm just randomly hooking up with. He goes, even though the majority of them are just wanting to hook up too. And so we got to a very powerful space for him. Like, if you could be in that sort of space, in integrity and being authentic to yourself, how would it be different?
Yeah.
He goes, well, I might. He did say, well, I might. I said, stop there. I don't want to might. Like, I would do this. Like, let's get really to the, I would be doing this. He goes, I would go into one of those sexual interactions going, this is what I'm here for. I'm here to enjoy a sexual interaction that fulfills where I am in this moment.
Yeah.
And as he was saying that, he paused and he goes, this feels really different. I said, yeah, okay. So how so? And he goes, because I feel like I'm actually speaking authentically about how I'd rather do it. And then as soon as I'm authentic, I'm being much more in integrity with myself. And he goes, and guess the biggest shift I'm already feeling. He goes, even as he's just saying, he goes, I'm not feeling like I just have to go do this. Like that adrenaline rush of got to go get it. Get on Scruff, get on Grindr, get on wherever. Let's go get it. And guys, whoever is listening to this, I don't think Brandon and I are either one bashing. If you want to have a hookup, I'm not going to bash that. I'm not saying that. In fact, I want everybody to be them sexual selves. But if you're feeling these pieces of like, this is out of alignment with me, this is out of my value set, these are probably some really good signs to, you may not be on the addiction route, but to really check in with yourself and go, okay, how would you like to feel different?
And I think even it goes into how do you connect with, how do you connect with yourself and how do you connect with others? I know on the surface, a lot of sex and porn addiction looks like it's about the porn or it's about the sex, but it's actually a lot deeper. It's really, how are you intimate with someone? How are you intimate with yourself? Intimacy, we as gay men, it has been not properly explained to a lot of us on what intimacy is. What does intimacy look like? What does intimacy look like in relation to another man? We were not taught that. We were not given that information. In school, we were all given the information of how a man should be intimate with a woman, and that's it.
Yep.
And if there is any male on male intimacy, it is wrong, it is bad, and we have most likely experienced violence because of it. And it's, those things compound. And like you even said, Rick, it's that it misaligns you so that your outward actions don't align with your internal values. And that's really a lot of what my work does, is trying to, how do we align it and how do we set it up for success?
This piece you just brought up, I mean, I know we're talking male to male, like gay relationships, but this is part of the problem with men in general. This ability to be intimate with another man and say, I love you, brother, or wow, you're a handsome guy, or any of this stuff, like just to, a bro.
Yeah.
If we have somehow managed that and can be more comfortable. I remember this is years ago. This was before this podcast even existed. It was when I was doing Life Uncloseted. I had a guest on who I don't remember how we met. We were in a similar entrepreneurial thing together and course and all that. And we just got to chatting about stuff. I said, I got a question for you. How do you feel when you're in a locker room and you feel like another guy might be checking you out and then suddenly you think, is he gay? And we had this really amazing conversation. He got into the whole intimacy and he goes, I'm not afraid to look at another man and go, man, you're built really well. You look great. Look at you, blah, blah, blah. He goes, but that has led to some people like, oh, you must be gay. And it's such an interesting thing. As soon as those sort of intimacy moments happen, and it doesn't always have to be about looks or you're built or, oh my God, look at the size of his cock or whatever. I asked him jokingly, I said, so did you comment on the size of his cock? He goes, no, but it was something that somebody should be commenting on. I thought it was really funny. But he said, it is an interesting space where we don't feel comfortable enough to be able to have that kind of dialogue. So that actually led to a podcast that he and I did. And we talked about this. And I interviewed, I don't know, 20, 30 straight men. And even some gay guys, because that can be really intimidating to gay guys too. Like, oh, this guy's trying to comment on me and wait, you're a little bit close. it was such a powerful conversation because it showed the vulnerability of men when it comes to anything to do with intimacy.
Yeah. Yeah, it is that. And I can definitely understand that with the gay man, because it is being in those spaces, which, it's I feel like the narrative is that you presume straight until they say they're gay. And it is, historically in all those spaces, they've been spaces of violence for a lot of us. It has been, they're not very safe spaces. They are not, it takes one person with fragile masculinity or a fragile sense of self to lash out. And so I can understand where the gay men were like, ooh, we're not, let them all go first. So I can kind of scope out the room and hear what they have to say. And then I'm going to comment on what they said, but not really interject myself, because that's violence for me.
Well, it is. And so much of what happens in our community, to kind of bring this full circle, is this unbiased, is it biased? I'm going to call it unbiased violence that we don't realize we're committing. The rejection, like, oh no Asians, or, oh no, I only bears. Okay. All of this stuff, that's fine. It's like, here's your preferences, but sometimes it moves to that space that then it is harmful. Sometimes it's bullying. And then here we go to somebody feeling completely rejected. They can't have social interaction. So then they isolate. The more they isolate, then they turn to these other spaces that we've been talking about, porn or sex addiction. And then we sit there as a society, or at least as a gay community, and go, what's wrong with them? Well, a lot of what's wrong with many gay men, yes, it came from their outside heterosexual world to a point. But then they enter into our gay community and it exacerbates sometimes worse than it was in the outside world.
Yeah.
And this leads to many gay men suddenly like, I'm alcoholic, sex addiction, drug addiction, whatever it may be. So
not feeling like.
So what are you most proud of about doing in your practice? I know you're fairly new and everything, but what is the thing you're most proud of to date?
So I am new. I'm new on the therapeutic treatment piece of it. Knowing that, how do I want to say this? Like, being able to help people through the problematic side of it. But I do come from a background of sex positivity and kind of sexual health. So I always have that, there is and I get this, I usually have this conversation with a lot of people when I tell them I treat sex and porn addiction. They usually tell me, oh, well, so you're not sex positive. I say, no. I am very sex positive. I've worked in HIV prevention for years. I want people to feel good when they're having sex. I was like, but that's where the difference is when sex doesn't feel good anymore, or you feel worse coming out of it than you did going into it. That's where I really want to start helping people. Sex is I think you even said it. We are human beings. We are sexual beings. We connect with each other in various different ways. And no matter how we decide to connect with people, it should be a way that lifts us up instead of degrades us. And so I love being able to help people find that balance, and be able to recognize it and fix it.
Awesome. That's so good. And it's so needed. And there's, you and I aren't the only guys out there in the world working towards this stuff, but it's always refreshing to me. And given that, you're in your 30s, I'm in my 60s, and there's just these things, I hate to say it, continue to be where the work gets to get done. I'm not going to say need, there's a need, but where it gets to get done. And when we realize as a gay male culture that if we can open our arms wide to let's give people the space to get to do this work on themselves, because when we do the work on ourselves, we do better with doing the work with others, not pointing the fingers, so to speak. I know some people listen to this podcast at times and go, Rick just seems to point the fingers. I'm like, I'm bringing awareness to this. I'm admitting this is what I've seen in our community. This is what I've seen myself do from time to time. Even as I talk through like, oh, what's my preferences? I always, when I am on the apps, one of the things I will say is, you seem like a really nice guy, just this interaction we've had. But I'm just going to share with you my preferences and what I'm attracted to. I don't know how to more nicely say that. Still, people will get upset. that's on them, not on me. I've learned that. I could say that, yeah, I'm not into this or not into this, but I'm like, here's what my preferences are if I'm going to go into an open space and have an interaction with someone.
Yeah.
I wish we could all embrace more of this, because I think it would help in the work that you do in helping people out of these spaces of addiction and all these sort of things. So last quick question before we wrap up here, since you brought it up, what is your definition of being sex positive for you?
My definition of being sex positive is promoting healthy sex and sexuality, but it's also identifying those pieces that aren't very positive or negative. Positive, because if we don't recognize those pieces that don't make us feel good, those boundary crossings, those negotiation slips that we tend to have sometimes in some of these interactions, you fall into that realm of what I call toxic positivity. It's, oh no, you're doing great, you're doing fine, you're doing this, you're doing that. Like, it's the constant praise, or you should feel really good about this, or you did something really great. It denies the whole story of the individual. We experience everything in both positive and negative lights. Not everything's going to be 100% positive. Not everything's going to be 100% negative. But we have to acknowledge both pieces of them to get the full story.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where positive and healthy sexuality tends to come in for me, is to identify both positive and negatives. And if we can't, we can't completely eliminate all the negatives, but how can we make it more positive than negative?
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Brandon, I'm so glad you took time out of your schedule to be with us and talk through this. I think it's such beautiful work that you're doing, that you're bringing into the planet that still needs a lot of healing, especially in our own community. And I love when I get to speak with another gay male who's doing this contribution and bringing their own spin on it, because everybody has a unique way of helping us bring others to that space of, I can talk about this. I need to talk more about this. So thank you for creating that conversation and ensuring that, you are opening a doorway for someone who may not feel like, okay, I can actually speak about this stuff. So again, his practice is based in West Hollywood and Long Beach area, but you can probably, because you're licensed in the state of California, you can probably work with anybody throughout California, correct?
Yes, sir.
Awesome.
I can see, and as long as you're within the borders of the state of California, I can help you through anything that you're experiencing.
Awesome. And we will have a link to Brandon's website if you're interested in learning more about him and stepping into your own way of being truly aligned with who you want to be as yourself, as a gay or bisexual man, or anybody in our community. I mean, we have other people who listen occasionally, but especially in the gay and bisexual male world. And again, just want to say thank you so much for sharing of yourself, being here with us. And guys, don't forget, there's just another episode around the corner. And also, if you want to join the community, go to our Facebook page, 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk, the community, and we'd love to have you join us there for further conversations. So, Brandon, thank you again for being here, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.